Charlie Baker is on live.
Good afternoon. Just want to make a statement with respect to the decision that was rendered by the jury today in the Tsarnaev case. First of all, I want to start by thanking the jury and thanking the judicial system. And I especially want to thank all the families that were affected by this terrible act of terrorism for their fortitude and their persistence in seeing their way all the way through this. At this point in time, I hope this represents some kind of closure for all of those who were affected by this tragedy. And I've always been and continue to be amazingly impressed by the ability of the people of this community to pull together around issues like this and to look forward. And that's certainly what I hope everybody does from this point forward.
Governor, we know that you are a supporter of the death penalty in some cases. There were some people that were against the death penalty, even family members that were affected by this. What is your message to those that did not support the death penalty and are not happy about this and may have even been victims of the bomb?
You know, we're a nation of laws here, and under our nation of laws, juries make the call with respect to decisions like this based on the evidence and based on the law. And from my point of view, as I said many times, while I certainly had an opinion on this, my opinion didn't really matter. The only opinion that mattered here was the one that would be rendered by the jury. And I think some of the commentary that was made by a number of the victims and their families was unbelievably powerful. And you know, God forbid that we ever find ourselves in a situation where we have to consider that kind of thing. But again, the way the system works is the jury makes the call, and the jury, based on the facts, the evidence, and the law, made their call today.
Is it the right decision in this case?
Again, I don't think about it that way as a right decision or a wrong decision. I think about it as the decision that was made by the men and women who served on that jury, who sat in that courtroom every single day for a very long time, listened to the testimony, heard from the victims and their families, heard from the defense with respect to the part of the trial associated with determining the sentencing, and rendered a unanimous decision. This was their call.
There's some argument out there that their death penalty is far more costly for taxpayers, 10 times more than putting him in prison for the rest of his life. How do you react to that piece of information?
I guess I would say that I don't really think in this particular case money should be the motivator for the decision. The decision should be made based, as I said, on the facts and the evidence and the law. And the jury, I think, from most people's point of view, heading into all this, probably could have gone either way. I think the fact that they made a unanimous decision speaks to the significance of the acts that were performed here, and their sense about the law and their interpretation of the law relative to the facts of the case.
Governor, you talked about closure and sort of what are your emotions having listened to or heard so much of the testimony? I mean, how is it sort of affecting you listening to everything that's happened in that courtroom over the course of the last few months?
Well, the biggest and most important thing that's affected me in all this is I have, you know, a wife and 3 kids, and I really do believe that this was, for many people, a there but for the grace of God go I. If you just happen to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time on the wrong day, you ended up involved in something far beyond what even in your wild imaginations you ever could have thought would have occurred. And that for me has always been paramount in this. The significance of the act itself is pretty obvious. The biggest issue for me is the randomness of what happened here. And as I said, I really thank the jury and the judicial system and the process for sticking with this. I thank all the law enforcement people who were engaged in that horrible series of events that led to the death of Officer Collier. And I'm glad at this point this part of the process is over. And as I said, I really do hope that for all the families that have been involved in this and the jury and everybody else, that they can find some closure and an opportunity to look forward. And by the way, I've been unbelievably impressed with the ability of a lot of these families to look forward already. I think about all the people who ran in the marathon the following year. I think about all the teams that came together to run on behalf of many of the victims in the following year. I've had a chance to talk to several of the families that lost family members on that day, and their positivity and their ability to find perspective in all this, I think is extraordinary.
Are there some you might reach out to now after the first visit?
I haven't thought about that yet. I'm still processing what happened.
Has this brought closure for you?
Well, I think every time we run the marathon, I don't run the marathon. I think every time everybody runs the marathon and participates in the marathon, it will be impossible for this to be too far from the top of people's minds. I would say that for me, this certainly ends the sort of ongoing trial piece of this. But I think it'll be a really long time before this episode and all that came with it ever lands in my rearview mirror, and I think that would be true for most people.
Would you say that this has changed Boston forever, even with this verdict?
I would say two things about it. The first thing I would say is that I think Boston showed tremendous resilience and enormous sense of community around this from the minute it happened. I've never been so proud of this city as I was with the way that it responded. Between the first responders, the public officials, the healthcare system, which delivered spectacularly under horrible circumstances, and the commitments that everybody made to the people who were damaged and lost as a result of this was unbelievable. And that's continued to play out all the way through for the following several years here. And as I said, many of the events that have taken place around the marathon, I think the marathon has certainly changed forever. And I certainly think for many of us who grew up here and for whom the marathon has been part of our lives since we were young, it's changed the marathon. And that, by definition, I suppose, changes Boston a little as well. But I think some of this has been, like I said, I think if Boston had any trouble understanding its identity before this happened, it sure hasn't after.
Governor, should the state of Massachusetts consider reinstating the death penalty?
That's not a very high priority for me. I'm far more focused on a whole bunch of other issues in economic development, education, even in criminal justice. This is not something that's on our radar.